and welcome to the Soulful Journey. I am Leeann. I am your host and fellow traveler in this crazy journey we call life. I just wanted to thank everyone who is taking the time to listen in and tune into this podcast. You know, it's been, for me personally, a long time coming to get here. And, you know, there's so many things that it's funny how you see your life start to go one way and then you start doing that and things switch and it becomes a whole nother ride, which is kind of what this whole experience is for me, is really, you know, something that I could have never expected, but yet here we are, as the universe does that for us quite a bit, you know. You think your life is going one way and then it goes somewhere else, and that's kind of, you know, what a part of my journey has been, is every time I think I have it figured out, I realize I don't, which I think makes that part of the fun, is, you know, not knowing what's going to happen next. So, you know, a big part of me kind of starting this podcast, first things first, is really just to, you know, challenge myself and to face my fears. Doing something like this alone, which I'll get into my story, I'm sure, throughout, you know, the different episodes, and I'll speak a little bit about it today as well. But, you know, part of my journey has really been believing in myself and believing, you know, that I can do things. And it's funny because traditionally I've been that person where it's like I don't believe it until I see it. And so I'm really working on that. Hence, you know, what this is instead of being like, oh, I'll believe it when I see it, it's like, just do it and do things that make you get out of your comfort zone. So this is definitely something that I'm doing on my own, to kind of channel, you know, that okay, I got this. Let's figure it out. Let's see, you know, kind of what I'm made of, if you will. So, you know, I really just wanted to kind of start with you guys saying, you know, my reason behind, you know, wanting to start this podcast. Obviously, as I said, you know, a piece of that was me really wanting to challenge myself and to face my fears, which I think is a big part of, you know, the spiritual awakening process, really just life in general. I'm definitely one of those people, or was traditionally, not as much so anymore, where comfort was where I would kind of go to, you know, which I think a lot of us find ourselves going into those places of comfort because they're familiar, you know. But what I have realized, especially within the last 3 years, because I started my spiritual awakening, if you will, or my soulful journey, as I like to call it, about 2020. But since I've been on that, it's been all about, you know, kind of getting myself out of my comfort zone and really challenging myself in that way and not playing the safe card, you know. So when I say soulful, a big part of that to me was because I really wanted to make my own soul full. You know, I did all these things and I kind of followed the program, if you will, as a lot of people, I think, find themselves, you know, when it came to my career and things like that. And I still felt a big part of my soul was missing something, you know, like it was just this little aching, like, I know you're doing all this stuff, but there's still something missing there. And so really, you know, this whole awakening journey really is a journey. And that's another thing that I've learned, that it's not the destination, it's really the journey. And, you know, kind of navigating through step by step, beat by beat. But a big part of that has been just trying to make my soul full. And I'm getting to a place where I'm realizing the more that, you know, I'm kind of diving in, getting to know myself and challenging myself to do things that get me out of what I historically would do, has really helped me have the most growth and the most kind of aha moments, if you will. So to get kind of started here in regard to just, you know, my own soulful journey, what a big part of my journey has been too is, like I said, getting myself out of my comfort zone, but also to be able to really listen to myself and diving within. So what kind of started my whole entire spiritual awakening was, like I said, back in 2020. So I was at the time in grad school and I was finishing up my internship. I had 3 more months left before I would be graduating and then become a school psychologist. So all of my schooling is in both education and it was also in psychology. And, outside of high school, just to kind of backpedal a little bit, I was definitely one of those people that I was like, what am I going to do with my life? I have no idea, what I want or what I like. And so I was constantly switching, majors, like in some ways, but switching, what I wanted to be when I grew up. But when I was faced with those questions, I was like, I don't feel like I'm a grown-up, I feel as if I don't know, I don't have a clue. And that's also been a big part of my own journey, is just learning to trust myself through the process and not follow, a program, if you will, because that's what I was so used to. I was so accustomed to kind of following along with a script, but when I did that, I always felt a sense of emptiness. That's that hole that I was kind of talking about. And I felt kind of lost because I never really knew, what does Leeann truly want? So, back to when I was in grad school. So I had always, loved children and loved the whole premise of psychology. So when I found out about, school psychology, I was like, that's it. This has to be it. This kind of feels like this is what I'm supposed to do. But again, it wasn't something that I can honestly say was truly authentic to me. There was pieces of it that I liked, but it wasn't something that I felt called to do. So I still felt, in a way, I was following this career path, if you will, for kind of the wrong reasons. I had some interests, I had some likes, but it wasn't that I loved it. And I also was following because I'm like, oh, it's going to be a good paycheck, and I'll have that big girl job that I can feel like proud about myself. And that's fine and dandy for some, but for me, I definitely was just kind of almost still playing that safe card, to where I didn't feel truly called to it. I was just still doing, again, what I thought was expected of me, and what I thought was expected by society standards. So it was 2020 and it was March and then the pandemic hit. And so this was right when my internship was getting super gnarly and it was like very stressful. I was never really one that was really good about handling my stress. How I was the panic, the freak out, lots of anxiety. And then I would be like, living for the weekend, as soon as the weekend comes, then I'll, drink and be able to kind of let loose and not have to worry about my problems. Like, definitely that escape kind of behavior was what was comfortable for me, even though it wasn't the best for me. And so I, had the pandemic hit and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so amazing. So for me, in my, current circumstance, because it was so stressful, I was able to get to a place where I was like, oh, I don't have to do all this crazy stuff with school. And I finally was able to, kind of have my world like settle down. And to me, that was the first time that I was able to get back to things that made me happy. Not being so like regimented when it came to a schedule and having to wake up when I wasn't ready to, and, just having to do everything that was required of me, as opposed to doing, waking up in the morning and being like, oh, what do I feel like doing today? So that was the first part of the pandemic. It was just really very much so very fun, and able to, even though it was really kind of unnerving not knowing what was happening in the world, in my personal little world, I was at least able to kind of lessen that anxiety and all those things that came with being in my graduate program. And so from there, there was about 2-3 months, something like that, I think, into the pandemic, hit my wedding anniversary with my husband. And so the two of us decided, since, the world was shut down, we would do something a little bit different. And so we had signed up for one of Tony Robbins, webinars. It was one of his first webinars that he had. And what I got from that was really beautiful. It was me for the first time really realizing how much fear was dictating my life. And when I realized that, it was kind of one of those things what sparked that, something within me where I was like, I might need to reevaluate kind of the way I'm living my life. And so that was kind of the first spark of, I would say, my spiritual awakening journey, was that realization how much fear was kind of driving my life. And so fast forward later on that summer, I went to a birthday party actually for some friends out in Mexico, and it was a ton of fun. Everyone was enjoying one of the days, and I remember like hanging out with everyone, and I just had to excuse myself. I didn't know why, but I felt some sort of something, higher than me, if you will, just tell myself to kind of excuse myself from the rest of the party. And so I went upstairs and I kind of overlooked, because it was on the ocean. It was really beautiful. And I was looking out over the ocean, and I had this overwhelming feeling of emotion come over me, and I started crying, and I felt I missed home. And it wasn't my physical home, it was my home, like what my soul was connected to. And I wasn't sure, what that meant, but I just started crying and really just releasing. And there was kind of feelings of just peace, but confusion, and also kind of this, yearning or wanting to know, what is this all about? Why am I feeling this sort of way? And it was a very profound moment for me. And quickly after that, I had actually gone out of town again with my husband. And when we were out of town, we were staying at this hotel, and I woke up in my dream state. So this was actually a lucid dream where I knew I was consciously aware, but I knew that my physical body was not up and moving. But in this lucid dream, I, had gotten up and I looked over at my husband. I could see through his body, and I'm like, what is happening? This is wild and, so confusing. But at the same time, I did have, this anxiousness, like what is happening, but I had never been in that lucid state where, I was still conscious, but, like I said, my physical body wasn't up and moving. It was, my soul was up and moving. And the very next night I had another lucid dream, and this is where things really turned for me, where I was like, okay, there is more to this life than what meets the eye. And that second dream that I'd had the very next night, I was laying there again, and I woke up again, still in this lucid state. So I knew I was still, quote unquote, sleeping, but my conscious mind was alert and aware. And I had felt this energy kind of come over my body to where I knew I had a presence or something higher or bigger than myself that was with me. And it spooked me, I'll be honest. I was very anxious. I'm like, what in the heck is going on here? And so I went to go reach for my husband to wake him up because I was scared. And I felt this energy gently grab my hand and guide my arm down. And I was like, oh my goodness, what was that? But at the same time, I had this peacefulness where I was, my conscious mind was still like, oh my gosh, my monkey brain was like, what is happening? But then at the same time, my higher self was definitely at peace with whatever that energy that I felt was. And so it was just completely wild. And, from there, I would say the next big thing kind of in my journey. So I had this stuff kind of in the back of my mind, and I had shared with one of my friends, and I had said, kind of what my experience was with the lucid dreaming, and my mind was going where I'm like, oh, I feel like there's more to this life than just what meets the eye, and was talking about, ETs, and just really just yearning for having this awareness of, what else is out there. There has to be more to this life, And so she had mentioned the name Dolores Cannon. And you have these points in your life where it's so crazy to me how it's something, just a name, can completely change the trajectory of your life. And that's how it was for me. And she had mentioned Dolores Cannon, and I'd never heard of her before. And for those of you who don't know who Dolores Cannon is, she was a trailblazer in the metaphysical realm. She was actually a hypnosis practitioner, and she had coined the actual method that's called QHHT. It's quantum healing hypnosis technique. And I myself am actually a QHHT practitioner as well. But she was really a trailblazer in that modality, and just in the metaphysical world, getting started back in the 60s with her husband. But she has written within her lifetime, I think something like 17 or 19 books, something like that. And so I had started listening to them, and it just rocked my world, because I'm hearing all of these metaphysical concepts and things like that I'm like, holy moly, like there's so much more. And I knew there was so much more, but it's almost like I got the confirmation that I needed just to really kind of dive deep and really expand my mind. And she was really, she always claimed and called herself the reporter, because what she would do is she would just share the information that would come through her hypnosis sessions, and she would just record them, and she wrote books from these occurrences. And so she called herself the reporter because she would just report what she heard. It was really just what her experience was, having people in this hypnosis state, and having other lifetimes and all these other crazy metaphysical things coming through. And even in my experience with some of my clients, it blows your mind, to hear some of the information that comes through. But it's so cool, because it just gives that confirmation to know that there's so much more to be explored in this life that, we don't even know about, or are just learning about collectively, as well as on an individual level. And so, I started listening to her books, and then, fast forward, after things started opening back up, I did land a job that I thought was, my dream job. I got it in the location I wanted, and I was able to, start my career as a school psychologist with elementary kiddos, which I loved. Little kiddos, still do. I miss them, but not the job itself. So, I thought that I had it all, all figured out. And what was funny is that's when I had my first dark night of the soul. And for those of you that aren't familiar with that term, it's really just that shadow work. It's kind of diving deep within yourself and figuring out, kind of shining that light on those darker places. Like, okay, the first time that I was really like, I got to be real with myself. I have to, kind of be as authentic and true to who I am in order to get through this. But it really rocked my world, because it was such a challenging job emotionally, as well as, just helping me. It was definitely a gift, because if I wasn't as uncomfortable as I was, I would have never have left and never have gotten to where I am now, and still have so much more to go. But it was definitely one of those careers where I was like, okay, this is nothing like I thought that it would be. Also working for a system, as we know, a lot of our systems are kind of going through, figuring out and breaking the old ways, because the old ways just really aren't suited to this new way of being. And so for me, I felt a big kind of conflict being in a system type government job or position, where, there was a lot of labeling, which I just didn't like, but that's just kind of what the system provided. And so there's all these things where I'm just like, what? Like, I don't subscribe to this. Like, your hands are tied in a lot of these things. And so it was just very stressful, and very much so took away and dimmed my light. And so this put me into a really dark space of depression and anxiety. And because of that, at one point I was definitely suicidal. And that was kind of, me in my darkest trenches, just being like, what the hell am I supposed to do? I work so hard to get to this place. I have it, and it is nothing like I expected. And I really didn't know what to do, And so what I did have, the light in the darkness, if you will, was really listening to Dolores's books, because I would have to be in traffic on my way to and from work. It's SoCal. So, I made the best of my situation, and I started listening to her books to and from work. And it was almost like I had this little escape to this world that just spoke to me and just felt like home. And it allowed me to kind of get through my day. And I would listen to these, different stories of these different people and be like, gosh, I wish I could get one of these sessions. Or I would find or catch myself, which I laugh now, like, I wish I could be one of these practitioners. This is so cool. But of course, that was a part of my shadow work, which I have learned, was, I would definitely not believe in myself. Again, like I said before, I wouldn't believe it until I saw it. So it was just kind of making myself like more small, like, oh, there's, I don't know if I could ever do that, or, being too scared to step outside of my comfort zone is really what it was. But I got to such a dark space, and, I was just working to, be able to have the weekends. And then on the weekends, like, it would just be drinking and, trying to escape and trying to have a plan. And then I would, go from that place of, being like, that girl that was just like escaping, to where then I'd be like, hungover, or just be so anxious bound and have the Sunday scaries before I would go to work on Monday. And I was just like in this perpetual cycle of just loathing, complete loathing. And it was really a very hard time for me until, I realized I have to do something about this. And being within and familiar with the psychology realm, I was very just kind of like, I don't know if therapy is really the right thing for me. And the reason being was because I didn't like the whole concept of, hey, your hour's up, we'll see you next week. Like, but what if you get to a breakthrough and, you need to still talk to someone? And what really turned me off by it, but as I know now, it was really, the universe, providing for me, is I went to reach out and see someone. And when I called, they basically were like, oh, we'll get you in 2 weeks. And I'm just like, okay, but what if, I wanted to do something to myself? Like, it's already hard enough to call somebody, let alone to just be turned down and say, we'll get you in when we can get you in. And to me, it just really kind of lit a fire under my butt, where I was just like, forget this. And don't get me wrong, I think that, therapy is wonderful, and it definitely serves its place. And I'm very happy for those that it works for. I just knew for me, I wanted something more on the spiritual side. And I definitely wanted something that was, out of the scope of what I kind of was already familiar with. And so that's why I decided to end up signing up for a QHHT session. And I just had the most wonderful practitioner I could have ever have asked for. She was so gentle and so kind and so welcoming. And to me, that's really kind of what I needed. But I also realized that I went into that session where I was still very much so not used to talking about myself, and in such depth that I was still kind of holding back. And so through my own session, I kind of left being like, oh, I was so aware, like, are you supposed to be like that? But then I was judging it. And so to some degree, I kind of dismissed it for a little while. as to thinking, I don't know if it worked for me or if it didn't. Like, I had these things kind of come through, but I don't know. And it wasn't until the synchronicities after my session had happened that I was like, okay, now I get it. I understand now. And this is true for a lot of people that I talk to, where they say, it's a lot of the synchronicities that have happened after their session. And so for me, I was, it was a couple months later, driving to work, still in that same headspace, but listening to my Dolores books, and they were coming to an end. And it's so funny because I'm kind of having that almost like weird synchronistic kind of moment right now, as I remember having them end and then being like, oh, I wonder if I'll ever tell my story. And here I am. So it's kind of funny how it's come around full circle. But the books were ending, and I was like, I wonder, I can't have this end. You can't tell me that it's over. I need more. I need to learn more. And through her book, she had mentioned her daughter, Julia. And so I was like, well, I knew Dolores had passed. So I was like, maybe her daughter has a podcast or something. And sure enough, she did. It was called The Metaphysical Hour. And so I put it on. And the first episode that I heard was this gal. She was from, I want to say Australia. And she was talking all about her life story. And I resonated with it wholeheartedly. She was saying how she switched jobs, and like, see, I'm getting the goosebumps. I'm like, oh my God, girl, you are speaking my language. Like, she had switched all these jobs, kind of that lost little, nomad, just trying to figure it out, and the highs and lows, and somehow, some way her path led to QHHT, and she became a practitioner, and she never looked back. And through my own QHHT session, my higher self, my subconscious, had stated that I would become a QHHT practitioner. And it was as if a light bulb just went chink. And I was like, well, I'm supposed to be a QHHT practitioner. Because when I had first heard it from my session, I'm like, I don't think so. I went through all of my masters, and I'm here, and I have this job, and it's, security and job security, and who cares that I'm miserable as hell, because that's kind of the conditioned mind that I had, where misery is quote unquote normal, which it's not. But that's what I was accustomed to, is being completely miserable and thinking, well, that's what everyone else does, so I guess that's what I have to do. And I hear this, and it was just, again, it was like the perfect timing at the perfect moment for me to hear that information again and for it to resonate. And it was just like that little puzzle piece that fit, and it turned on and illuminated me. And what's funny is right after that, the podcast that had happened right after, by coincidence, which we know there is no such thing as coincidence, on purpose it happened. And there was another practitioner that had come on, and he talked about how he had worked with a mother that was pregnant, and the baby came through in the session and spoke to her mom, and had basically said how, this is how you can help raise me. I'm, going to basically have all these gifts. And, it was just the most beautiful, profound thing. And what was really crazy to me, hearing this, and where it just resonated, was I was working in the schools, and I was like, it's almost too late. I feel as if when we're, in the schools, like, we're just trying to figure out how could we make the child fit the school program, as opposed to really, having it be the other way around, and, to help enhance the child's gifts and, those sorts of things. And so for me, it just felt very backwards, where it's kind of that whole, sit down and follow the program and just do all this work. And if you, have this label of, your attention is off or this or that, then basically it's a problem, and we need to have a program that makes you, fit the mold. And none of us fit the mold, right? We're all these beautiful, individual, gorgeous creatures, and, we need to have that be enhanced and that be at the forefront. So it was just really wild hearing this child's soul come through in this session. And it was just like again, I was all, I could help in such a different way that's completely non-traditional, but in as wild and crazy, if you will, that it sounds comparative to the old way, it also felt very normal to me. And it felt, more like, this is different. I like this. I kind of want to explore this area. So that's really when, I had that, again, aha moment that was just like, all right, I need to switch gears and I'm going to become a practitioner. And so I had decided to leave that job. And I just want to tell people out there who are kind of seeing this as being something that resonates with them, where, you're in a job that you do not like and you need to switch things up. It is scary, and I know that. I mean, I felt every bit of those fears, but there is a quote that I actually just heard the other day, and it's so true. It's like, on the other side of fear is this feather bed that's going to catch you. And it's true, I mean, it is not easy, but there's so much more to this life that you can explore as long as you, kind of get out of your own way. And I mean, that to me, I'm still trying to explore that. And don't get me wrong, I still 1,000% have my moments, but it was definitely the best thing I could have ever done for myself, because I would have never have seen what I'm made of. I would have never been able to really challenge myself and see, where does my journey continue if I settled for the comfort of, that paycheck and the comfort of, just having this whole kind of, I guess, trajectory kind of planned out for me. And don't get me wrong, for some people that works for them. And I'm like, you know what, as long as you're happy, really, that's the only thing that matters at the base of it. But if you have that kind of burning desire inside of you to switch gears and to really see what you're made of, do it, and you'll be amazed by how many beautiful things kind of open up and doors that open up for you. And truly you are provided for in such a big way. There is something bigger, than all of this. As we all know, we're all a part of this collective consciousness, and we are always divinely provided for. But I think one of the biggest factors of this game of life to get over is getting over our own fears, which are our blocks that block us from, being able to kind of continue on and to see what else is out there. And so, from that moment, I was able to, really just be like, okay, I'm gonna quit my job. And I'm so fortunate that I have, such a supportive husband who really helped me to, have that support system that I needed in order to do this. And so, moving forward from there, I started all of my QHHT, classes and all that stuff. And, I would say that that's kind of the honeymoon phase of, after that first dark night of the soul, where it was just kind of like all this exciting stuff that was happening in my life. And I was able to actually, really just kind of expand my mind more so into this whole spiritual community, into this spiritual work. But, from that, like, I started to realize there was other things kind of going on that my higher self had in store for me. And one of those was I started to tune in a little bit more to kind of my emotions and things like that, because things were just like not lining up. And one of them was, my implants. So I used to have breast implants, and I started to realize that they were making me sick. And how that journey kind of started was just me, my stress response was just super gnarly. Like, if it was a normal stressful situation, I would just respond, but just like 0 to 60 real quick. And it's funny, around that time, I had started to get some dreams as well, where my implants and my dreams were making me sick. And a big part of my spiritual journey has been dream communication. So there's actually a book I'll put in the show notes that I started to use when I was journaling and meditating. If I'd remember my dreams, I'd write them down, and I'd use the dream book, I believe is what it's called, to kind of see, what are the messages or things that they were trying to communicate with me. And this is how my higher self communicated with me, and still does, actually. And so I had, found out like through my dream state and like that communication that I was like, okay, my implants are making me sick. And so fast forward, I finally got to the place where I was like, okay, I need to have this surgery. And that was a part of the letting go. That was definitely a big part of that kind of leading into what was this year of that second dark night of the soul work. And the difference between the first one and then the second one that kind of started, this year, was the first one, I was still in that kind of old way of thinking where I was like, oh, I made a big decision and I switched it up. Okay, we're all good now. Like, I made it, like, it's fine. Like, everything else is going to be honky-dory, kind of those rose-colored lenses. And little did I know there was a lot more in store for me. And so I had basically had the implant thing. That was kind of what started the second dark night of the soul stuff, where I started diving even deeper. And I never really did that too much before. Before it was really kind of more surface. It was like, oh, I can help everyone else, but I didn't want to look at myself, I would make some of those big decisions, like leaving my job. That was a really big decision. I'm so happy and grateful that I had the courage to do that. But I thought, oh, that's it. Okay. And now I can just help everyone else and we'll just live at this happy kumbaya life. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Leeann, it's so endearing. But yeah, no. There's a lot more in store for you, as I found out. And so that kind of started my journey of just really kind of listening to myself and really kind of diving into, okay, what is my body trying to communicate with me? And I started listening to other books and really just kind of, picking and listening to kind of what resonated with me. And one of the things that I had heard, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's so true, is that your body is really a GPS system for you. And so your emotions are going to respond to things in order for you to listen and tune in. And so that was kind of happening at the same time. So it was almost like when I'm saying tuning in, I was tuning into where is the physical, and emotional, and what is it trying to express to me? This is also a part of your higher self speaking to you. So me being able to have the physical element of the implants, making me sick was a part of it, but it was also helping me tune into my body as well. It was the time after that where everything, all of the doors in my life just felt like I was on standstill. And for me, this was definitely a very hard thing to accept. I was so used to just being go, 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 go. And so this is the first time that my entire world had to truly be shut down. But there were so many things kind of happening at once, but it was all the internal side. So like I had said, the first time around, it was like really just making that decision to start living my life authentically and follow my soul's mission. That was kind of my first dark night of the soul, shadow work type of stuff, really listening to what does Leeann want with her life? What do I feel called to doing? So that was the first phase. The second phase was really like, okay, girl, so what is hiding in that, in those little nooks and cranny of your soul that we need to just like spring clean and get out and let them surface and really heal from and transmute, these types of things. And so that's what's kind of transpired, this year with the second part. So, I was healing from this surgery and I couldn't do what I used to do, which was, okay, then I'll just go out and I'll just go with friends or I'll just have another event that I go to. It was like all of that stopped and I had to really sit with myself. And that was so uncomfortable and confusing. But at the same time, it's like I realized at some point, I don't really know what the point was that I got to where I was like, I really have to lean in, but I just did. I ended up just leaning into it and really kind of asking those higher level questions. And a big part of that too was me coming to terms with the fact that, I had to get my own answers for my own self. I couldn't get them from anyone else. I couldn't outreach to anyone in the sense of saying like, what should I do or how do I do this? And so a part of this journey has really been me diving in deeper to really figuring out, where are my answers? And I will say from experience, we do have all of our answers from within us. But you have to be willing to do that work. And what do I mean by doing that work? The things that really make you uncomfortable are usually those indicators, remember the GPS system, that's trying to get your attention. And so when you really kind of dive into those areas of your life, you're going to get the most of the aha moments, when you really dive into those areas that make you uncomfortable, whether it be relationships or, whatever it is, those are where a lot of your answers lie. And so, that's kind of been what has taken me to this place of where I am right now, has been just really diving into what are Leeann's needs, how do I see fit, and not outsourcing, getting my information from, other people's opinions or from just kind of, oh, what did you do? Like wholeheartedly, I feel like, yes, you will get breadcrumbs when you need them. So there's going to be things that you listen to. Maybe there's things in this podcast where you're like, that's an aha moment, or that's a little breadcrumb, or that's a synchronicity that I needed in order for you to find the answers. But from my own experience, they have to resonate with you, and you have to be able to dive within yourself in order to know what the next step is. And another thing that, really stood out to me, kind of having this, okay, like I'm starting to kind of see or understand how this works, is being comfortable with not having 10 steps ahead. You really have to be comfortable with surrender. And I know for some people that I've talked to, the whole notion of surrendering just seems either really uncomfortable or kind of scary, or just like, what the heck do you mean? And what it's basically saying is that you really just let go of the control of being like, I have to have all the answers in order for me to move forward. It's really just you being able to say, okay, maybe I don't have all the answers, but I will get what I need when I need it. And I will listen to that next step. And once I get there, then we'll feel it out and see, okay, universe, what's going to be the next one, and so on and so forth. That's been a huge part that I've had to really accept, is just not knowing, I used to think I was really helping myself by planning everything, planning out my life, planning out X, Y, and Z, planning out my fun, planning. But the more I did that, the more I just kind of put my claws into this control beast that I had within inside of myself that was really navigating. And, even with this podcast in itself, I'll be completely honest with you, I was so scared to do it. And so, fearful of like, gosh, will anyone even care what I have to say? Or, is it going to really help people? I mean, because that's really what I want to do, is be able to help people. But that in itself is such a beautiful gift to show people that, hey, you know what? I don't have all the answers. I don't have, the magic recipe of what's going to get you through in your life, but maybe, just maybe, I will have one breadcrumb or one little thing that can help inspire something within yourself in order to, start your own journey, or to continue on your own journey, or give you hope to know that, no matter what, you are going to be okay. And even though, life has definitely its challenges, Lord, I have cried enough tears to fill the gosh damn ocean. My poor husband has just been it's been like, oh my goodness, you're definitely going through it. But I am that person that wears my heart on my sleeve, and so it is good to have that support system around you. But I mean, one thing that I've realized is that as much as I have such a beautiful support system, I really have to be my own support system as well. accept that help and welcome it and embrace it when you feel it's deemed necessary to let that in, but also not have that be the only thing that carries you through. You will always find your answers to carry you through. I promise you that. And even if it's not the way that you thought that it would be, somehow, some way, it will work itself out in a more beautiful, profound way than you ever thought imaginable. That's what it's been in my experience. And I hope that it's the same for you. And so that's why, I really just wanted to kind of do something that is, like I said, out of my comfort zone, but at the same time, with starting this podcast, another part of my journey that I felt like I was yearning for something was that sense of community. And I thought, you know what? I mean, let's see what kind of community I can start just by starting this podcast, because, I want you to know that you are not alone. This is a very personal experience, going through our own ascension or spiritual journey, whatever it is that you feel accustomed to calling it. It is a very personal one. However, when you meet those people along the way that give you just that piece of something that you needed to keep moving on or to keep moving forward or just to feel heard, that to me has been such a golden gift that I have been so grateful for. And that's where, I really hope that this is what this podcast can do, is just give people that sense of hope that there is always hope. There is always going to be that light at the end of the tunnel. And it's okay if it's a tiny little eensy-weensy little speck of light. As long as there's that, then you're like, all right, you know what? I can get through the trenches of whatever that is, that I'm going through. So I really am just honored to be here with you guys. I'm honored to share my story and to share my experiences and to also equally hear your guys' experiences. I would love to hear from each and every single one of you. If you would like to leave any sort of, comments, whether it be on, Instagram or on, Apple, podcasts or whatever it is, I'll leave all that information in the show notes for you guys, so you know how to get a hold of me, and just to please reach out, because you know what, in these times that are kind of just all new and completely just uncharted in some ways, but the biggest thing that I feel really gets people through is that sense of community. And this is something that I really hope that this podcast can explore and to build, is that sense of community, and just so you know that you're not alone on this journey and we're in it together. So anyways, that's going to conclude us for today. I wish all of you guys a beautiful rest of your day with whatever you're doing, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time.